I remember feeling so happy about it because I thought if I get the MRI and I'm diagnosed with cancer or a tumor, at least then people would be more understanding of what I was going through. At least people would be nice to me. Hello, my name is Isabella and I am a 17-year-old girl from California. For some background on me, I'm part of a lot of different communities. I'm part of the Latino community because I'm ethnically Mexican and Guatemalan and I'm mixed race. I am part of the LGBTQ community and I'm going to talk about how I went deaf, not from childhood, but as of recently. It started around a year ago, right? June 1st. I decided to not go to my cross-country practice in the summer. It was already 2 weeks into summer and I had been having the time of my life, hanging out with friends, running, doing whatever I wanted to, but I noticed that I didn't run as I wanted to my level, and so instead of attending the practice and waking up early like I was supposed to, I decided to get up later on that day and call up my now ex-boyfriend, but called up my boyfriend at the time. I told him if he wanted to go run with me at the high school that we attend just down my street. He agreed, took my little brother with me as well, and everything was really normal that day. Nothing really too scary, too serious, until later on, of course. I ran my first mile. I was planning to run 4 miles that day, and I noticed symptoms that would be alarming to your average person, but to me, I wasn't really caring about my health. I had a pretty bad eating disorder at the time, so really anytime I felt bad in any way, shape, or form when I was working out, I didn't really care. I just kept doing whatever I was doing because that's what an eating disorder does to you. It makes you do irrational things. So that day after my first mile, I noticed I had a terrible headache. I noticed I had ear pain, throat pain. I noticed that I was just horribly fatigued. Even my eyes were starting to go bloodshot red the more I ran. I was already pretty much starving myself at that point. I'm way better now, but at that time I wasn't doing very good. And so I just ignored it because I also had seasonal allergies, and if you know anything about seasonal allergies, they cause fairly similar symptoms when they act up, right? I continued running, and on the third lap of my third mile, as soon as I took a step from the last curve to the last straightaway, like before you sprint the 100 meters to the finish line, my right ear somehow just lost sensation, if that makes sense. There was this odd whoosh noise and this odd clicking noise, and my hearing wasn't gone completely. It had just felt like if I put my hands over my ears like this, right? I noticed as I finished that lap, my other ear hurt too, and because everything started hurting a bit more, my headache started hurting more like crazy, I elected to just stop running. Went back home, told my parents, and they told me, you're fine, it's just your seasonal allergies that are being a bit more intense. You need to take some medicine, go back to bed. If your symptoms don't get better in the morning, we'll take you to the doctors. When I woke up the next morning, this is when things started to get a bit scarier though. When I woke up, when I turned over on the other side of my bed to face my doorway and get up, right, I could not breathe. And this wasn't in the sense that my throat was constricted or my chest hurt. It was in the sense that I was so nauseous and I felt so dizzy that if I had breathed a little bit more, it would be like I would throw up everywhere. And I noticed that instead of a clicking noise, my ear was ringing, like a white noise almost, like the very high-pitched part of it. And even though my ear was ringing this loud and that hurt my head, I noticed that when I started, actually stopped being so nauseous, and I kind of, gathered myself up a bit, when I spoke, I sounded different. Everything around me felt different because this right ear wasn't picking up anything at all. And so with that, I was really scared because when I tried getting up out of my bed, I noticed that I couldn't really walk very well. And it wasn't that my legs weren't working, it was because I was just so dizzy and I had such a terrible headache that I couldn't stabilize myself. And if anyone suffered from vertigo or dizzy attacks, you would know that it's quite difficult to walk, especially if it's super severe, right? So I told my dad, can you drive me to the doctor's? And he says he can't because he has other things to do that day, which he did have really important things to do that day. And then my mom is at work in downtown LA, so I have really much nothing else to do. So I was pretty much out of options. And so he just told me to take an allergy pill or cough medicine and go back to sleep, and hopefully I felt better. I woke up later on and I started getting ready because we were going to go see Spider-Man Homecoming that day. We go to the movie theaters. It was really scary because as the music and all the ads were playing from the movie theater screen, I noticed that my ear, the right one that's affected, just kept hurting, like this piercing pain every time I heard noise. Movie ends, and as I tried getting out of the theater, I couldn't really walk very well, like in the morning, and so my dad had to drag me out of the theater, and I kept throwing up over and over and over again. I had to drive back to my house to go get my medical paperwork for the emergency insurance and all that stuff. We go to the hospital, and the scariest part of that trip was when we had stopped at my house before we went to the hospital. I opened the sliding door of the the seat that I was in, right? And I tried stepping out to get fresh air. My parents were already in the house getting all the paperwork. And I noticed that I couldn't even step because I had immediately tripped and I fell in this muddy, slightly muddy grass. And I could not for the life of me muster the strength to get back up. Like, it was, like, every sense I had was robbed from me. You know, my ability to see, I was seeing crazy, all like this. My ability to hear, I couldn't hear very well. My ability to speak, I had vomited so much that it hurt to talk. My throat burned. You know, my ability to not feel pain or, like, you know, complete and utter sickness, for lack of a better term. You know, all of that was just kind of robbed from me. You know, I felt really bad. I remember just kneeling there on the floor, and I remember just crying because I felt so weak because it hurt so badly. I didn't know what was going on with me, you know? Like, just the last day I was running 3 miles with no problem. You know, I was enjoying my abled body. I was enjoying having full health, or, well, full physical health. And then I was just taken away like that. And so I get to the hospital, right? And they put me in a wheelchair. I'm in so much pain, and my mom starts telling me that my eyes are bugging out weird, and my eyes are bloodshot red, and my skin is pale, and I just look like literal death is what she told me. And doctors drew out some blood and asked me questions on my symptoms. And here's one of the most important things I've learned from there is that when you're at your doctor's, be as specific as you can with your symptoms, and doctors, please, 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 please pay attention more to the words of the patient and how they feel as opposed to what other people say they feel. You know, I was horrified and scared because I couldn't tell them what was going on, but I could, you know, if I just was a bit stronger, and so I really get on myself for that and not properly addressing them. But at the same sense, the doctors at that time really didn't ask me many questions. They're just kind of like, oh, how are you feeling? Oh, okay, yeah, whatever, we'll take care of you. And I don't know if this is because I was little or anything based off my identity, but that's a topic for another day. And they tell me that I have seasonal allergies, and I have middle ear fluid. That's my diagnosis. Some little mucus fluid in my ear is what's causing all of these symptoms. And while, you know, there are actual conditions that cause those symptoms, I felt like if that diagnosis was completely wrong. Like, I felt just this gnawing feeling in my stomach, and not because of the throw up. It was like I genuinely knew something was wrong. Like, I knew that was a wrong diagnosis the moment I heard it, ironically enough. I kind of just took the diagnosis and I was like, okay, it's whatever. 2 days later, I went to the doctors. They told me the same thing. I had more energy to talk this time, obviously, but she kind of just ignored my concerns, and she was saying that, oh yeah, seasonal allergies, don't worry, I get them too. I felt like if they had taken my words a bit more seriously, that I wouldn't be in this position, right? But things happen, so I go home, and this doctor, had prescribed me a nasal spray. Just spray stuff into your nose for a month and it should go away. And I thought, that's really odd, but okay. And I remember the doctor had told me, if your hearing doesn't return, you need to go to an ENT doctor or ENT specialist, and you need to talk to them. We talked to them over the phone, and they told my dad more specifically, why are you keeping your daughter at home like this? Those are a lot of symptoms to have, and she needs help, like, immediately. It was already school at this time, right? It was around like late August-ish. And it was pretty tough, because as soon as I went to the ENT doctors or the audiologists, they ran these tests on me. It turns out I didn't have any fluid in my ear. There was no evidence of fluid in my ear or anything like that. I told them what I was actually experiencing fully, and that's when they took my concerns seriously. And I took a hearing test, and I had a 75 decibel hearing loss in my right ear. And if you don't know, that's basically around a severe hearing loss. Almost, you're pretty much deaf at that point in that ear. They educated me a bit about sudden sensorineural hearing loss. That's what they diagnosed me with. The other diagnosis of middle ear fluid, it was essentially a misdiagnosis. So we go to another impromptu appointment that same day, and this lovely doctor, she tells me that I need these steroids and that they're gonna help my hearing. And I was to take them over a course of like 2 to 3 weeks, I believe. And if that didn't help my hearing, then she told me that there was a pretty strong chance that I was going to be left deaf like that. Took the medicine, it didn't work. And then I came back and the doctor told me, we have 6 months to fix your hearing or find out what's wrong with it to fix it. And if your hearing doesn't return from these 6 months, from June 1st when I got the symptoms until like around December, if it wasn't fixed until then I would be left permanently half deaf. And as a hearing person with very little experience with the deaf community, or just hearing loss in general, that was really, really, really scary to me. And at this time, school was really tough because it's like every other week I was going to the doctors for something. And I had 3 AP classes, I had plenty of friends, I had a sport, and pretty much all of that was taken from me, to say the least. My friends gradually distanced themselves from me. I rarely had time to go to school. I would probably only attend classes like half the week. I looked up accommodations available to me and everything, and so I told people, if you need to get my attention, just wave your hand, turn off the lights, stomp your foot, do something. Instead, people would slap me across the face or the head, they would shove me, they would throw staplers at me, they would stab me with pencils or pens. And I took this because I couldn't really hear them, and I didn't really know if it was by accident or not, and they would kind of put on an act like, oh, I'm so sorry, but after thinking it through, that wasn't an accident, right? I remember one time a teacher, when I asked her, I'm sorry, how do I do this certain thing, and she basically yelled at me for not listening and not using my ears or whatever, that's what people told me, she said. And after that, I had to tell her I'm half deaf now. I lost it during the summer. Some of the teachers would stare at me really weird when I was trying to lip read them. And let me tell you right now, lip reading is very difficult. Not all deaf people or hard of hearing people lip read. And so half the time I was kind of just staring at the teacher like that. And I don't blame them, but I have some sympathy. I'm trying to understand you. And, sometimes they would deny putting captions on certain videos because, it bothers the other kids. And, but there was other teachers too that were really, really lovely about it. Like my history teacher, for example, was amazing about it. He let me use my phone for the captioning app. He told me, hey, if I need to call on you or anything like that, just do a little hand signal or something. He would ask me questions about it after class. He told me if you need to talk to the counselor and thing, and he was really nice. My English teacher too, she was really lovely about it. This kind of took the place of friends that I had who abandoned me at that time, essentially. They didn't really talk to me as much. And I remember I actually felt a bit suicidal at that time. I struggled with mental health issues. I just remember thinking, what if I just stopped existing? What if I just end it? We would end all this discrimination and pain I'm going through, right? I remember obsessively, every time I got home, instead of doing my homework at times, I would just go on the phone and I'd obsessively look up what's wrong with me, how to fix hearing loss, how to fix vertigo. But anyways, they took me to get an MRI around Halloween. They had done all of this testing beforehand to see if it was an STD, if it was a certain virus, if it was a certain genetic disorder. Nothing was coming up positive, and so they decided you either have cancer or a tumor, like you have to have one of those two, like everything else has been weeded out. And I remember feeling so happy about it because I thought if I get the MRI and I'm diagnosed with cancer or a tumor, at least then people would be more understanding of what I was going through. At least people would be nice to me. You know, at least they wouldn't harass me over it. Luckily, I wasn't diagnosed with either one. After that MRI, it took a really long time to get an appointment with a specialist, and at this point, my doctors were kind of telling me it's very low chance that you're gonna get your hearing back. Eventually, we managed to land an appointment with an ENT doctor around December, I think, and he starts telling me that I had viral labyrinthitis after he looked at all my paperwork for a solid 20 minutes, and the appointment room was very, 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 very quiet. And after I gave him a few details, he turns around and diagnoses me with viral labyrinthitis. Essentially like a version of the flu, a very rare condition, but in the middle ear, in the labyrinth of the ear, right? And he tells me that, you know, it's a rare condition, which is probably right. They had difficulty just diagnosing you with it anyways. And then he told me that, you know, what happened to me, the fact that I suffered permanent hearing loss and permanent vestibular damage and everything. As my parents later translated to me, he said that it was like getting struck by lightning 3 consecutive times. And so that was that. I remember going home that night and crying myself to sleep because I finally had something to latch onto. I wasn't undiagnosed anymore. I finally had something to tell people. I had something to claim and tell them, this is what I'm going through, this is what I'm suffering with. So after that, my parents and everyone were looking into getting an implant. And if you know anything about cochlear implant, it's basically where you get some magnet thing screwed into your skull, in your ear, and you can hear out of it because it attaches itself to the nerve, the hearing nerve, right? The cochlea, I believe, or around there. However, it causes a lot of vertigo at times, and I was already suffering from vertigo. So instead I was looking into hearing aids, and that was a whole nother mumbo jumbo. The hearing aid company were just terrible, or the hearing aid companies and the insurances were terrible at responding to me. They got letters lost, you know, they said that we didn't have this certain insurance when we did. And in general, it just seemed like the system didn't really care about me. They thought, well, look at her, she has good grades in school, she must not be suffering that much, right? Which isn't the case at all. The only reason I had those good grades was because I worked my butt off to get those grades, because I stood after some classes and I asked the teachers, what are you talking about? Or I texted the kids to send me copies of their notes because I didn't get everything down. Or I would watch videos online to self-study because I just didn't have the time to be in class because I was at doctor's appointments or at home because I couldn't walk normally and I was so dizzy. And so, haven't gotten my hearing aids yet. Nothing there. Nada. But, you know, I don't need hearing aids to be valid. I don't need hearing aids to be deaf or hard of hearing. It doesn't make me any less of a human being without them, you know, right? Because some people seem to have the notion that deaf people are broken and that we need help. We need as much help to be hearing, meaning we need to be taught how to speak properly. We can't use sign language. We shouldn't be, you know, we need an implant or we need hearing aids. And this is probably the biggest part that bothered me, is that I would tell people, like, I'm fine with being deaf. You know, I didn't fully believe it at the time, but, you know, I had some exposure to deaf YouTubers, deaf creators, the people like Nell DeMarco, Jessica Kelgren, Fozard, I think her name is, Rogan Shannon, Ricky Pointer, you know, Signed with Heart, YouTubers and creators like that, The Essential Sign, you know, certain deaf organizations. I had a deaf counselor who helped me. You know, those people really helped me accept myself because everyone around me was telling me that there's something wrong with me. I constantly get, well, I hope you get your hearing back. And even though I was told that it was permanent, and people focused more on my hearing than the fact that I couldn't walk on some days. If anything, the vestibular problems took away my life, not the hearing loss. There's accommodations for hearing loss. There's a language for it, right? in my case, hearing loss, right? So, you know, I had a bit of trouble with my identity because there's people telling me, stop pretending you can't hear me. You're not deaf, you're hard of hearing, you need to get it straight. I would tell people, you know, I'm deaf from one ear. It's loud in this room. If I can't hear you, I can't hear you. Like, I'm sorry. Either, like, we both need to learn sign language or use paper, or you need to talk louder or come talk to the video. You know, there's only so much I can do to understand you. And people would just not listen. They would ignore me, or some people would try to talk crap right in front of me. Matter of fact, my ex-boyfriend made fun of me for being deaf right in front of me, on my good side. So I heard, not everything, but I heard enough to know he was making fun of deaf people in front of a deaf person. And just in general, the community that I live in is not very accepting towards deaf people. You know, I have a hard of hearing friend. She's also deaf in one ear. So people like that help me accept myself and everything, but, you know, I'm still on the journey of accepting myself. You know, I'm learning ASL. I involve myself with other deaf people online, or deaf creators. I speak to some deaf people, and, you know, the very few that I can find in my small town. And it's really helped me a lot, and, you know, it's really helped me break down those misconceptions I had about deaf people, because, you know, it's kind of like, imagine you know nothing about a certain group of people and then you wake up and you're suddenly one of them. You're hard of hearing, you're deaf. Not even to mention the fact that I'm also losing, like, part of my hearing in one ear, you know, after a recent hearing test and everything. I don't know why, but it's happening. This also begs the question, you know, is the diagnosis that they finally gave me, was that the accurate one? Because, you know, there was no official testing that proved it, but that was the accepted hypothesis. But it is what it is, you know? So I'm into physical therapy now, and I just started it. I'm looking into getting hearing aids, but, you know, with the pandemic going on, it's quite hard. But I'm learning sign language, and, you know, some people look at me with pity, and, you know, especially from older family members, they tell me, oh, like, I'm so sorry, like, my poor mijita, like, you need to get better. And it's like, no, I don't need to get better. Like, this is who I am now. This is who I embrace. You know, this is me. And I think, you know, it's important to address a few misconceptions on deaf culture, that most deaf people in the deaf community, or just hard of hearing people in general, while some of them do resent their hearing loss, some of them do feel like they're broken, some of them try to be as hearing as possible. They try to put on hearing aids or cochlear implants to try to hide them. They're very insecure about their disability, or how the world sees their disability. But to deaf people, people who involve themselves in the deaf community, you know, there's a difference between just being medically deaf and being culturally deaf, because there's a culture surrounding my deafness. Those people who involve themselves in deaf culture do not see themselves as disabled necessarily. I mean, they acknowledge that is a disability in the mainstream world, but, you know, if it wasn't for the lack of accommodations, or if it was for the fact, like, if people learned American Sign Language or other sign languages, we wouldn't struggle as much. We would just be perfectly fine. You know, in deaf-friendly spaces, deaf people flourish. Why is that? Because they're given the accommodations that they need and the language that they need to succeed. And so, not all deaf people hate themselves, and, you know, people try to convince me for a very long time that I should despise myself, I should despise hearing loss. And I don't hate it. I love it. It exposed me to such a rich culture, to amazing languages, to amazing people. Like my counselor that I mentioned earlier, she's a beautiful woman. So, you know, I don't regret it at all. You know, there's times where I'll be sad and I'll wish I was hearing again, but that's mainly in situations where people are treating me very badly because of my disabilities. For me, I come to realize that it's not about me being broken, it's about what people think is broken. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm disabled, but there's a bigger problem in society. You know, lack of accommodations, or just general ignorance on the deaf community. You know, I've gotten comments like, oh, you're deaf, or you're deaf in one ear? But you're still so pretty, like, oh my gosh. And it's like, or people will tell me, oh, so you're learning gang signs? Because I live in a pretty ghetto community, very ghetto, low income one, and that one is like, no, sign language is not gang signs. And sign language is not just like Morse code either. It's a full language attached to a certain group of people and a certain culture, just like Spanish is attached to people who are Spanish from Spain, or Hispanic people from other Spanish-speaking countries. ASL, or American Sign Language, is the language of deaf people here in the United States. And there's many different sign languages, turns out. That surprised me too. I was like, what? There's Spanish Sign Language, there's Greek Sign Language, there's French Sign Language, there's British Sign Language, there's American Sign Language. They're all different. Similar but different. Just like any spoken language, and they deserve just as much as respect as other spoken languages. You know, when people often see on like TikTok or something like that, people mimicking sign language, and it gets me very upset because you're basically mocking a language, you know. I'm ethnically Mexican and Guatemalan, and it's like if someone of a different race or a different ethnicity were to walk up to me and start mimicking Spanish to me. That's what you're doing when you mimic sign language and call it gang signs, you know. So all we ask is that you respect the culture, respect the language. If you genuinely want to learn it, that's one thing, but if you're out here mimicking it and making fun of it, that's another thing, you know. It's not dark humor at that point. You're being ableist. You're being discriminatory towards disabled people, and that's not okay. Especially like lower income, very tiny knit communities like mine, there's just so much rampant ignorance around people like me. You know, people seem to think that if I get hearing aids or cochlear implant that I'll be cured. The thing is, when a deaf or hard of hearing person gets a hearing aid or a cochlear implant, you know, they're choosing to get it. They are just as much valid, and they deserve just as much respect from you and just as much accommodations with or without the implants or hearing aids. And even then, cochlear implants or hearing aids do not cure a deaf person or a hard of hearing person. You know, I'm getting hearing aids because I haven't learned sign language, so I don't have that route to go. You know, I'm learning it, but I'm not very good at it, and I feel a bit insecure signing in front of other people, so that's why I'm not signing in this video. In general, we need to work on accommodating disabled people, and that doesn't go for deaf people only. That goes for all types of disabled people, you know. I'm focusing on deaf people, so for example, let's normalize subtitles and captions, especially on YouTube, especially in the age of coronavirus, when most teachers are relying on online learning and they recommend YouTube videos for notes. And a kid like me clicks on the YouTube video and there's absolutely no caption. Let's normalize that. You know, YouTube creators or just anyone like movie theaters, let's normalize putting captions or subtitles on our videos. This world isn't built around people like me. It's built around people with full hearing. Another thing I like to address is that deafness is a spectrum. As I mentioned earlier, people would tell me, you're not deaf, you're hard of hearing because you're only deaf from one ear. Like, I can't hear very well. Like, the moment I go out in public, it's over for me. Like, you know, I'm staring at you like, what? Especially with the face mask. People have the general conception that a deaf person has to have an implant or a hearing aid, uses only sign, and doesn't speak. The thing is, that's not the only way to be deaf. That's not the only way to be hard of hearing. It's a wide spectrum, and I represent part of that spectrum. People who lose their hearing later on in life and join the community a bit late. You know, there's people who were born deaf their whole life and yet are not exposed to the community at all. There's people who talk even though they're profoundly deaf, and I very much applaud them for that because, like I said, I'm not profoundly deaf, but like it still gets hard to talk at times. Like, it's really hard to speak. So, you know, don't nag a hard of hearing person or deaf person about that. Don't force them to speak if they don't want to speak. Don't ask them, why aren't you talking? I mean, we're open to all sorts of questions as long as you're respectful about it, right? But yeah, I mean, just lack of accommodations. You know, in school, especially teachers, listen to this. We need to teach ASL. You mean, come on, they teach French. Some places teach Latin, a dead language. Some places teach Spanish, and yet we can't teach a language to help a whole community of people. I remember reading that actually, like, some places who teach sign language were threatening to be closed down, and that's just awful because we need as much exposure to that language as possible. People who rely more on sign language than me, they need it, especially. Not all deaf people or hard of hearing people read lips. It's actually quite difficult. Like, go watch a YouTube video with no captions, no subtitles, lower the volume completely, and then start the lips and tell me if you could catch every single word they say. And in general, I mean, all of the stuff I'm telling you can be fixed with just a few minutes of research, really, especially for educators or anyone who works in the public sphere and directly with people. I recommend you learn a few phrases of ASL or the sign language that corresponds to the sign language that's frequently spoken in your area or signed. I recommend that you encourage the teaching of ASL or other sign languages in your areas. I encourage that you look up things about deaf culture, because if you're going to be an educator, anyone who works with people, you have to be ready for all types of people, all types of races and cultures and disabilities and mindsets and nationalities. You need to be prepared for that, and more often than not, people are not prepared to meet the people who are deaf or hard of hearing. It's 2020, we have so much technology. There's no reason why I should go to a movie theater and they tell me, sorry, we don't have the little captioning thing to help you. There's no reason why we should be forced to be someone we're not. There's no reason why we should be forced to assimilate to a hearing world when other people from the hearing world are not meeting us halfway. Really, I just encourage people to do literally the bare minimum 3 minutes of research and learn some stuff. Learn what to say to deaf people, or learn what to ask them, learn how to accommodate them. And trust me, we're used to accommodating people all the time, so we will definitely meet you halfway there. If you give us a little bit of respect, we'll return it tenfold. Nothing makes me more happy when, I'm say for example, sometimes I'll be signing in public with people who I've taught a bit of phrases to, and someone will tell me, hey, I know a little bit of sign language, and they'll actually show me a phrase that they know, and I'm like, oh my god, look at you. And so, trust me, we're mostly friendly people, but we'll meet you halfway there. I've learned a lot on my journey, or they switch into becoming deaf and becoming disabled, but it is what it is. I'm still having trouble with the labels. I just say deaf for now because, both ears are experiencing it, and it's tough, bro. It's tough. I still struggle with my other disability. I struggle with acceptance for my own friends and family members at times. I just hope that this message gets across to people, and I hope that people are more considerate towards deaf and hard of hearing people. I don't know whether I'm disabled or I'm not. Am I disabled enough? Am I deaf enough? Am I hard of hearing enough? And that doesn't matter. My experiences are valid. Everyone's experiences are valid. We're all different. Just like hearing people, we're all different. We just ask to be accepted, and we ask for basic accommodations so that we can succeed as hearing people do. Because we could do anything a hearing person can, besides hear properly. So, with that, research is important, expanding your mind is important, and accepting yourself is important. Whether you're hearing or you have another disability, or whether you have no disabilities, accepting yourself and loving yourself for who you are is important. What matters is that I'm happy with my life, and it matters that you're happy with yours too. And so I hope that my story helps someone out there. I hope that it reaches someone. Thank you.